I am Madison Williams with Oklahoma Humanities, here to talk with Jay Hanna about his experience with the organization and his experience in the humanities. Okay, go ahead and tell me a little bit about yourself to start off.
Well, first of all, thank you, Madison, and thanks to the Oklahoma Humanities Council for reaching out for me to be a part of the dialogue as you piece together an audio-visual quilt of what this organization has meant to the state of Oklahoma. It's my honor to be here. A little bit about myself. It's pretty easy. I am the Forrest Gump of Oklahoma, and by that I mean that, as you recall the movie Young Madison, it was about a young man that was in a lot of the right places, not by his own design, and that's exactly my life story. I am a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, and my name is Jay Hanna. I grew up in Adair County, which was named for one of my many great, I will not run down all the greats, it would bore you too far, grandfathers of John Watt Adair, a Scottish trader that lived among the Cherokees. And my family traveled to what is now Northeastern Oklahoma on what is translated from Cherokee to English as the Trail Where They Cried, the Trail of Tears in 1838 and 1839. And I take it as one of the great advantages of my life of growing up literally within 28 miles from where my sixth great-grandparents arrived on the Trail of Tears in January of 1839. It was on a Tuesday, as my grandfather told us, when he took me to the exact spot where my Starr family from my grandmother's group, STARR, a very prominent family among the Cherokees. They were treaty signers of Nuachota that actually sort of launched the Trail of Tears. And at a very young age, he took me there and showed me the field where they had arrived after a very long trek of probably close to 1,500 miles from their home in Tanasi, as we pronounce it, in southeastern Tennessee. And at the time, I thought he was joking. He said, boys, our family came here and arrived here on a Tuesday in January of 1839 with absolutely nothing. And so far, we've been able to hang on to it. And at the time, I thought he was so trying to be humorous about it. And in many ways, I've learned that he was profoundly wrong. We arrived with everything. We came with a unique language, a unique culture, a unique perspective of how the world is created and how the great creator watches over us all, and with wonderful traditions that still live on in our family. I grew up there in Adair County and was the valedictorian of a graduating class of 13. I like to remind everyone that it would have been a class of 14, but I think Billy Joe Hogshooter may have been arrested a week or two before and was unable to attend graduation. I went on to attend school at Northeastern State University, the Jalagi Ageo Junta Schoolsti Juntana. In Cherokee, it means the place where the big girls learn, because Northeastern is, in fact, the former Cherokee female seminary. Our principal chief at the time in 1846 that helped to create the legislative foundation for Northeastern, or for the seminaries, what would become Northeastern, was of my blood quantum. He was 1/8 by blood Cherokee, so he looked like me. And his Cherokee was not so good. So he wanted to call both the male and female educational institutions seminaries. But we don't have a word in Cherokee for seminary. So when we say that it is the Agea Junta Schoolsti Juntana, it simply translates to the place where the big girls learn. And that was true. I attended as literally the fourth generation to attend school there in Tahlequah at what is recorded, I think, as being the second oldest institution of higher learning west of the Mississippi River. And there's something very special, Young Madison, about attending classes inside of a building that your great grandmothers attended school in during the 1890s. From there, on to University of Oklahoma to be a SLEP scholar, where I studied under Norman Cousins. You'll remember him as being the publisher of the New Yorker magazine and a personal friend of Albert Schweitzer. I was in a class of 11 that spent an entire semester studying under and with Dr. Cousins. From there on to graduate school at a place called Oklahoma State University, a land grant school. I think you may be attending there. And I was fortunate enough to be able to teach there for 2 years, officed in a building that you know well called Morrill Hall over on the east side of the campus, of course, named for the good congressman that authored the Morrill Act, which opened a pathway for land grant schools. After that period of time, I have attended a number of other schools. I'm a big believer that we should all be lifelong students, and mostly within the realm of professional education. I have studied at University of Colorado, also at a place called Harvard, where I was at the Kennedy School for 2 years. And I am a banker by daylight hours and have been for almost 40 years, only here in the state of Oklahoma, working for the largest state chartered bank in the state of Oklahoma, that being Bank First. I'm an above average guitar picker. I have been known to hunt feral pigs, and this hand has survived noodling. And at the same time, I am a reader of books and a writer of papers, although my English is probably not as well refined as it should be. And I'm a curious man that enjoys looking at all things so that life may be fuller. I think that's maybe just a quick overview.
Yeah, that was great. You mentioned going to multiple different schools. Do you remember which school particularly you were really interested in the humanities? Like, when did that start?
Oddly enough, it started in high school. When you grow up in the third most poverty-stricken county in the entire United States, Adair County followed 2 counties, I believe, in West Virginia during the 1960s and early 1970s in its poverty level. But there's a very unique and wonderful thing that occurs when you grow up in an environment like that during that particular era. There are 2 types of school teachers in schools of remote areas of that nature. They are folk that grew up there locally, and they've probably gone to Northeastern and Tahlequah, it being an educational institution, and they've come home to set their life's career. There are also teachers there that had accrued a great deal of student debt. And they discovered, as the federal student lending program would allow during the 1960s, that if you were to teach in an underprivileged area, they would write off your student loan debt. So suddenly, here I am in a school which has all 12 grades in the same building, and you sort of start in the East End, and hopefully 12 years later, you come out the West End. And the per man year cost for educating a child is a big whopping $249 a semester, and it's 120% free lunch program. And yet I had all levels of algebra, plain and solid geometry, trigonometry. I had English teachers that were absolutely the very best people that you could find. Judy Witt, she was from Chicago, Illinois. How she got to Adair County, I was afraid to ask even back then. Nyla Phipps, who later would be in charge of the literature program at Northeastern State University. These were my junior high and high school English teachers, and they taught literature. And there were their equals that taught history and civics and government. 2 years of Spanish, something that is very commonplace today, but I would tell you in the early 1970s, late 1960s in Adair County, having 2 years of foreign language in an underdeveloped school, such as Watts, where I attended, where we had 0 Latino population. There were 2 languages spoken in the county, but they were English and Cherokee. it was there that I discovered that there's a much broader world available. And oftentimes it was provided for me a ticket through books and through literature and through people who would engage in literate conversation and cause me to ponder. And as Dr. Lee Manzer, someone you should remember there at Oklahoma State University over in the business school, used to say, we should all be about pondering. And he would define it as you should think deeply about things. And at an early age, I was blessed to have good teachers who apparently had accrued way too much student loan debt and were willing to teach in an underprivileged area that would cause young people to ponder things that were greater than what they knew.
Okay, so you mentioned that you were a banker for about 40 years. How did your relationship with the humanities change as you moved from education and going to school and becoming a banker?
Well, trying to keep feet on both sides, so to speak, of society today, whether it's in the arts or in the humanities or history or law or in business or technology is very much a challenge. It's much like growing up in tribal communities, especially when you're a light-skinned tribal citizen. You sort of have one foot in the white world and one foot in the tribal world. And I followed a formula, once again, very Forrest Gump-esque, not because I had somehow figured this out, but I had those teachers that I spoke of. They would say things that would point me in a direction. As I mentioned earlier, 13 in my graduating class are only 2 of us that attended college. Ronnie Welch attended along with me. Still a good friend, and we often get together and have conversations about how our lives were changed because that one English teacher I spoke of very early in our high school careers would say, well, you need to study these subjects, you need to read these books, you need to write these papers because it will prepare you for college. And much like Forrest Gump, I said, so I'm going to college? And she said, oh yeah, of course you're going to college. And you'll need that. And even at Northeastern, when I arrived there, my debate coach and one of my great professors, who later would be my father-in-law, Dr. Val Jean Littlefield, was the type of man that would pull me in to look over my selection of classes for a semester. And he'd say, well, Jay, you need to take these classes because when you go to graduate school, you will have, you will need this experience of reading and thought to prepare you for that. I'm going to graduate school. Oh yes, yeah. Well, Doc, I don't know I'll be able to afford graduate school. He says, well, you're getting an education degree because I was getting what today would be called a letters degree, speech, English, history, humanities, with an ED at the end of it. And he said, well, you'll teach while you're there. And he was correct. I had literally no idea the influence of the humanities in my life that caused me to understand, just as debate did, and argumentation, that all good arguments are well organized and they are well outlined. It's the sequential nature of thought that really evolved out of my studies of the humanities when I was in college at Northeastern. And it prepared me for when I went on to Oklahoma State University, because there I thought, well, maybe I really should prepare for a job in business. And so while teaching in the College of Arts and Sciences, it was an interdisciplinary program with the management school. Now, young Madison, you're attending at OSU today, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes, and I would tell you that that school has evolved a great deal. There's a business school there today, but when I was attending at OSU, the business school was over here, but the management school was over here. Management was not simply embedded into the business program. It's very much like fancy Eastern schools back east, like Dartmouth or Harvard. So my interdisciplinary work in communication consultancy in the Arts and Sciences School, linked in with a management school, prepared me to look at industry with credentials from organizational theory, strategic planning, business-related topics. So obviously, after graduation, it was about looking for a real job, and I had pondered going on to pursue a PhD, but instead made my way into the real world of industry. And I found that there was a wonderful complement between this right and left brain, so to speak, this world of understanding law and literature and government and civics and art and the mathematics that exists within those disciplines, because it very much is a sequential structure, whether you're looking at Henri Matisse or you're reading Moby Dick. There is a structural framework within the arts that in many ways very similar to what we see in the business world. Carrying both of these perspectives, I'll pull up short of saying skill sets, because I'm a master of none. Remember, I'm a perpetual student. But the fact is, I find that there is not a point of friction between business and the humanities, or between technology and the humanities. I find that there's a strong complementing flow, very yin and yang, that exists between the two. And I've tried to be about cultivating both sides throughout my entire business career. I try to play some guitar every day. I like to write some music every day. I like to read books that are away from the top 10 business sellers. And if I do read books, and I brought a visual aid with me, you would appreciate this. This is Malcolm Gladwell, Outliers, the Story of Success, which a lot of people say, well, man, that's a great business book. Have you read this, Madison? Have you ever read this book?
No.
Could I read you a passage in here for just a moment? Could I share something with you? Yeah. Malcolm Gladwell, in his book, The Story of Success. Now, I'm not saying, gee, I'm a success. I'm just saying that sometimes I want to be one. So I read what other people say about it. But Gladwell starts out in the very frontispiece of this book by saying, what is the question that we ask about the successful? We want to know what they're like, what kind of personalities they have, or how intelligent that they are, or what kind of lifestyles that they have, or what special talents that they may have been born with. And we assume that it is those personal qualities that explain how that individual reached the top. Now, I'm sorry, for my teachers in school, but I mark in them a great deal. So I apologize for doing that. But after all, it's my book, so I get to mark in it. I'm going to jump to the other side. He says, in Outliers, I want to convince you that these kinds of personal explanations of success don't work. People don't rise from nothing. We do owe something to parentage and patronage. But people who stand before kings may look like they did it all by themselves, but in fact, they are invariably the beneficiaries of hidden advantages and extraordinary opportunities and cultural legacies that allow them to learn and to work hard and to make sense of the world in ways that others cannot. It makes a difference where and when you grew up. That explains, in my thinking, how it is that people reach for all of these wonderful skill sets that they've arrived, and whether they're doctors, lawyers, or Indian chiefs. And the fact is, we're bringing forward all of these concepts, and maybe at the most cellular level. Most certainly, I'm wearing my ancestors' genes, probably both figuratively and literally. But the fact is, we are cultural beings. No matter how successful we are in medicine or science or in business or in technology, we're cultural beings. And we bring forward with us all of the things that Gladwell talked about. We bring forth these cultural legacies with us. And that's the property, and that's the atmosphere of the humanities. It's language, it's culture, it's literature, it's law, it's art, it's music. It's all of those things combined together. And I believe that when you amplify those in your profession, even if it's away from the humanities, if you amplify those things in your personal life, that's where a fullness and a richness comes. It just issues forth like a wellspring. The humanities play a role in everyone's life. The question is, do they recognize it? I choose to.
Hey, that was really good. That was really deep. I don't know what to say to that.
Well, thank you. I'll write myself a B+ here.
Yeah.
I fought great inflation at OSU as much as I could.
Yeah. So with that being said, how did you get involved with the Oklahoma Humanities?
Did I mention that I'm the Forrest Gump of the state of Oklahoma? Did I mention that earlier? Yeah.
You did mention that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, once again, just like in the movie, I did not have it on my life's bucket list of things to do. Oh, that's right. Be appointed by the governor or be selected to go on the Oklahoma Humanities Council. As a matter of fact, if someone had come to me and said, "Oh, Mr. Hanna, we want you to be on the Humanities Council," I said, "Well, I don't have, I ain't that smart. I don't have that background. I'm not intellectual enough to be there." And so I have Gene Rainbolt to blame entirely. And H.E. Gene Rainbolt is the chairman emeritus of our company. He just celebrated his 92nd birthday, and he is the quintessential community banker in the state of Oklahoma. And he is also one of the greatest humanitarians that I know. He is a man that has worked in banking and business, and he has championed education and the forward motion of cultural evolution in this state. And I mean at the base root level. A phenomenal thinker and a phenomenal doer. And he came to me, and I'm getting to be an old guy, and so I've lost all vision of remembering some particular dates of at least recent decade, but it's probably been well over a decade ago that he came to me and he said, "Jay," he said, "there's Dr. Anita May is the executive director of the Oklahoma Humanities Council, and they are doing outstanding work in the state of Oklahoma, particularly in rural markets." And, Madison, you have to understand that our banking corporation is only a banking corporation in Oklahoma. We are today, though, in 60 communities across the state of Oklahoma, and 63% of our $9+ billion in assets are located in non-metropolitan communities. So we're in Tahlequah. We have a bank in Marlow. We're in Kanawha, Oklahoma. We're in small towns. And Gene Rainbolt, he said, I believe that the Humanities Council is working to bring a greater awareness of the humanities into rural marketplaces, not just among the school system, but among the adult populations of these communities. And he said, they have an opening on their board of directors. I would like for you to consider serving on that board, which is phenomenal because he had nothing to do with the appointment of people on the board. He knew Dr. Anita May, who was the executive director, and she had approached him. And if I know Gene Rainbolt, she'd probably ask him to be on the humanities board. And of course, he's a captain of industry, and he thought that I might be a good representative for the bank. And I would also tell you that Dr. Anita May, there's, and I say this tongue in cheek, she had larceny in her heart by asking me to serve on the board, because obviously in such organizations, you have to have financial prudence. And what better way to show the endowment for the humanities in Washington, D.C., or I think that the Oklahoma Humanities Council was technically tucked up inside of the Oklahoma Historical Society. There was sort of a parallel budgeting structure that went on there, and ultimately the governor of the state of Oklahoma even appointed a certain number of directors at that time. And I believe that Dr. May was looking for the fact to be able to say, oh, we have a banker on our board of directors. And she absolutely had a design that I was going to evolve into the either the treasurer's post or something of that nature, to quote unquote bring credibility to what was happening with the Oklahoma Humanities Council's management of their budget and the monies that they were being entrusted with. I was probably a big disappointment to Dr. May. I told her one day in a conversation that as she was designing for me to be on the finance committee and to look at these various things, I said, you do realize, Dr. May, that I'm in the financial business every single day of my life. And I would prefer to not come here and have to be a banker. I would prefer to come here and to work with the history professor from Oklahoma State University that was on the board, or someone that was in theater production at OU, or a wide variety of lawyers that in legal background. It was a phenomenal board. And I said, we'd rather work with them on looking at programming that will help to extend the humanities into rural markets in the state of Oklahoma. It's what I'm passionate about, because I came from the rural markets of Oklahoma, where if it had not been for those very dedicated educators that said, read these books, think these things, ponder these thoughts, play this music, draw this art, I don't know where I would be today if not for them. I think she was angry at me. I think she had a very sound plan for how I was going to be the banker that was on the board. Fortunately, Charlotte Ream Cooper, who lives here in Oklahoma City, she'd been on the board for a number of years. Charlotte was a treasurer for the Humanities Council. She has a wide variety of credentials in the investment arena, insurance, things of that nature, and looking over the financials, which I did, being a board member, every month, everything was well in order there. It was nothing untoward happening financially. And I didn't want to have to be a banker in something I was volunteering to doing, because after all, I had to do that every day. That's how I started on the board of directors of the Oklahoma Humanities Council.
Good. So once you stopped being a banker on the council, what kind of projects did you oversee?
Well, we all participated in the review of grant requests. You will find former board members that would say, oh, it was a pleasure to have Jay Hanna there. He was always asking questions and looking at things. And you will find other board members that say, that man was a pain in the arse, and we did not enjoy having him there. We had, I'm glad this is a Zoom interview, because I'd probably have to get into a wrestling match by telling you the truth. You do want to hear the truth, don't you, young Madison?
This is going on public record, so it's whatever you want to say.
I understand that. I understand that. There were grant applications that would come before the council. I'll give you an example. Maybe there's a rural community in Northeastern Oklahoma that had partnered with Gilcrease Museum in Tulsa, or maybe with the Stovall Museum, as it was known in those days at OU. We know it today as the Noble Museum, and there's one of the greatest collections of Catawodocus pottery to be found in any of the museum institutions, not only in Oklahoma, but across the entire United States. And you know from your historical studies that the Catawodocus was the largest Indian confederacy in North America. 1,500 years ago, believe it or not, Spiro, Oklahoma was in fact the center of the universe. And of course, the Catawodocus ruled heavy over what we would know today as Oklahoma, a big chunk of northeastern Texas, northern Louisiana, a big swath of Arkansas, and all the way up literally to Missouri. And in the Stovall, as well as in the Gilcrease, are outstanding examples of early Caddoan artifacts. So back to my example, maybe a grant application came before the Humanities Council in a rural community that wanted to bring examples of that Caddoan pottery to their community to really help bring a broader knowledge of Indian native cultures. And of course, these are not just practical vessels, these are art pieces that were decored with expressions of their religious beliefs or their cultural traditions. And in many ways, these were iconistic of who these people were 1,000 years ago. And yet I would find some of my fellow board members that were like grading papers. You know, they'd look at these applications by, you know, small organization or rural community, and they're going, well, this sentence really isn't structured very well. You know, they've got subject and verb disagreement, and I don't know if this is really, you know, the best way to say this and whatnot. They would want to, you know, set it to the side, and I would challenge them. So, you know, we're not grading grants here. We're providing money for rural community organizations to bring knowledge into their communities. So there would sometimes be strong debates about approving those grants and appropriating those particular funds. There's a wide variety of other programming that went on as well. We were big supporters of a project that had been in existence for a time called Chautauqua. And young Madison, Chautauqua, you will know from your historic studies, was very important in the late 19th century and early 20th century. That I would describe Chautauqua to people of a humanities tent show that made its way across the country. And yes, it was music, but it was also readings, and it was recitation of poetry. It was a wide variety of things. And the Oklahoma Humanities Council actually owned a tent, and we had an entire bevy of some might say actors, but they were in fact true Chautauquans that went across the state of Oklahoma to replicate the Chautauquas of 100 years ago in communities. We had book reading groups. Dr. Lynn Musselwhite, who is a retired professor from Cameron University in Lawton, was just a brilliant man who was very dedicated to the humanities. And he led a program at the Humanities Council that would actually organize adult readers to take up a particular text. And he would lead them through an analytical discussion of what they've been reading. It was like a book club. And to think that there might be 5 ladies in Hobart, Oklahoma, reading Moby Dick and then talking about it with Dr. Musselwhite seems like that, well, that might be kind of an odd program, but he took those types of, let's talk about it, I think may have been the name of that program. He took those programs across rural communities across the entire state. And suddenly people who may have been forced to read great pieces of literature when they were in junior high or high school or college and just got through it, or maybe it was clipped notes that got them through their exam in humanities class. Suddenly Dr. Musselwhite was there taking them to a deeper understanding of what that literature was about. We were about funding programs that would not change minds, but would deepen thought, would cause people to do, well, what did Dr. Manser tell us to do? He asked us to ponder things. He asked us to think deeply about them. So in small ways and small audiences all across the state of Oklahoma, at least during my era of being on the Humanities Council, that was exactly what we were about. And fortunately, there was no eye gouging or ear biting, and I didn't get in any fist fights with any of the history professors or literature English professors that were on our board that wanted to grade those grant requests. I was ready to get the money out in programming for the people. That's what I think that we were instructed to do by the Endowment for the Humanities, by the Oklahoma Historical Society, even by the governor of the state.
So what do you think was the biggest impact on rural communities with these programs that you guys worked on?
I have to return once again to my my previous words. The fact that there is an organization in the state that would step forward to cause thought and dialogue, in some cases probably debate, to have a civil forum, something that here today in 2020 and 2021 appears to be endangered. You know, civil discourse and the concept of tolerance seems to one only needs to look at the 6 o'clock news, pick up a newspaper, and see that I believe these things are in jeopardy. What the Humanities Council has been about and is still about today is causing civil discourse on a wide variety, all of the various topics that make up the humanities, to exist in a dialogue that causes people to ponder, and it causes people to connect, not in talking about some Netflix series that they saw, or some just a community sports activity. Not that there's anything wrong with Netflix or community sports activities, but I have to think on that example that I used of 5, 6, 7, 8 people that come together to read a piece of literature and to be led through a discussion of its deeper meaning, and see not just the beauty of the language, but to see the underlying themes that exist. When you do that with other people, you connect at a much deeper level with them. Today, I am fearful that so much of the social interaction that we have in our state is at such a veneer level, and seldom do we take time out, because it takes time. It takes time to read. It takes time to write. It takes time to compose. And when you do that with fellow citizens, and you do that in a community-related program, where you come together to ponder, you know, the cultural and historical significance of the pottery of the Catawadoccas, suddenly you start thinking about this great timeline that we all exist upon. Back to Gladwell, you know, we are inheritors of cultural legacies. It causes us to embrace our cultural legacies, and not just to think about it, but perhaps to begin to act upon it. Because if we become responsible citizens for perpetuating our cultural legacies, then 200 years from now, 1,000 years from now, maybe our descendants will look back and say, these people faced challenging times. They faced pandemics. They faced social unrest. They grappled with racial inequality. They fought wars. They survived a pandemic. They faced things together, not as a disjointed set of political parties or of special interest or regional values. They moved as society.
Um, okay. Did you ever meet any individuals that you felt like were really impacted by these book clubs or anything? Like, did you happen to hear any individual accounts?
Almost anyone that I had an opportunity to chat with, either grant applicants or the fact that sometimes people will say, "Well, where's your hometown, Jay?" Well, I live in Norman, Oklahoma, and yeah, I lived in Stillwater for a while, and I lived in Guthrie for a while. I was president of the Historical Society during the historic preservation, and yeah, I lived in Tahlequah, and where I served my tribe and helped to chair our Jalagi study, the Cherokee Constitutional Convention. You know, I have hometowns all across the entire state. And so I'm always fascinated when I meet people in Okemah or I meet them in Lawton, or maybe out in Woodard, I think as some of them call it out in Woodward. And conversations roll around to various organizations that stretch across the entire state, whether it be Leadership Oklahoma or the Academy for Goals, various educational entities. But one entity seems to be uh, a bright weave in this little tapestry called Oklahoma. And oftentimes conversation will roll around to the Oklahoma Humanities Council. Yes, there's an Oklahoma Arts Council, and yes, there's an Oklahoma Historical Society. And those are vibrant weaves in our state. But I find people who have talked about being a part of Chautauqua, being a part of Let's Talk About It. Here over the past decade, I find folks that, and once again, I reach for a visual aid, talk about the Humanities Journal. Carla Walker. This is where I sound like the old Treasury Secretary of the United States who once told a vice presidential candidate, "I knew Jack Kennedy." And I would tell you that I knew Carla Walker. I know Carla Walker, but I knew Carla Walker before there was an Oklahoma Humanities Journal. And watching Carla in her evolution through the leadership of the council and bringing about this piece, today I find more people that reach out and say, "Hey, I read your article in the Citizen 2020, or I read your article 10 years ago about the importance of studying history, or I read another riveting piece on votes for women." Today, the Humanities Council, through this one channel of journal, probably have given me more validation from citizens of the importance of the Oklahoma Humanities Council. There's a lot of fine publications that are out there in the world, whether it be the Chronicles of Oklahoma, maybe even the Oklahoma Heritage Association. One can find a wide variety of very professionally developed periodicals. The Oklahoma Humanities Journal stands shoulder to shoulder with each one of them. And at the same time, because it is a true humanities journal, takes up topics that others either glance off of or are too perhaps narrow in their subject matter to fully embrace. Carla's done a fantastic job with this, and I'm very pleased to see that the Humanities Council is dedicated to keeping this publication vibrant and alive for our citizens across all markets.
So going back to your work with grant requests, I know you're not a banker, but let's talk about money for a little bit. How impactful do you think these grants really are in their like amount? You know, how much like made a difference? Like, did it matter the amount, or was it just the fact that they had a grant helped?
I don't know where you are from or where you grew up, but I will tell you that where I'm from in Adair County, the infusion of something as small as $1,500 to assist a local organization in being able to bring an exhibit, to tell a particular story, to bring someone to their community for a lecture series or a reading. That is a phenomenal investment for them, in particular in rural marketplaces. Today, when we listen, particularly here in 2020 and 2021, when the economy has been so negatively impacted by the pandemic, and we see dollar figures that even challenge bankers to be able to comprehend in their mind. I mean, there's lots of commas in $1 trillion. There's lots of commas and zeros in billions of dollars. And so we hear these every day, and read it in the newspaper, hear it in the news, the state and the national scene attempting to bring stimulus monies into the environment. And I think we've become kind of callous to the fact that it really does not take a great deal of financial investment to bring about long-term and durable change in the way that people think, what they think about, and then how they use those thoughts to perhaps interact with one another in a more tolerant fashion. So yes, we saw grants that were $10,000 or $13,000, but we also saw grants that were less than $2,000. I've been very fortunate to work with Preservation Oklahoma, another entity that's focused on bringing preservation efforts at the grassroots level. Our company, Bank First, has been a contributor to something called Plan First. And it's a grant program that is a dollar for dollar match, not a huge amount of money, but what I've heard in that arena of historic preservation, when you look at and I don't want to show my ignorance once again, but you see, I believe that architecture genuinely is well suited in the humanities. And so when you look at the architectural revitalization for our historic structures and communities in the state of Oklahoma, it takes so little to help a grassroots preservation movement to plan first and being able to bring in the appropriate expertise for saving a historic structure that is significant to the history of that particular community, or is a very unique piece of architecture from a particular interpretive period, whether it's Art Deco or the eclectic Gothic periods or late Victorian. I mean, Oklahoma is just an absolute jewel box of architecture across the entire state. And in those arenas, I've discovered that $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 can do so much to propel a local group of people into the thought that we can apply for a grant, we can actually get monies and look at what we can do, which then takes them to the next level. Well, if we can accomplish this, let's move to seeking additional funding. Suddenly the community says, we're excited about what's going on, let's contribute locally. It is as though tossing a pebble into a pond, the rippling impact of grants, large and small, have phenomenal potential. Not always durable. Sometimes it's just a splash, But in so many of, particularly our rural communities, it's a rippling effect that just continues in concentric circles to grow and grow. That's one of the great advantages of what I believe that the Humanities Council has done through the years, is being able to channel those dollars to cause that set of ripples to impact local communities.
So earlier you mentioned how some civil discourse is kind of hard to come by in the past couple of years, but how humanities allow for that civil discourse to show up. So where do you think the humanities are going in the next couple of years? Where you think they should go? Like, what do you think the future of humanities is?
We will need and it's only my opinion, okay? And remember, I'm from Adair County. What do I know? Did I mention I'm the Forrest Gump of this conversation? What do I know? The humanities, in its largest framework, I'm not talking about the Humanities Council, but I'm talking about the arena of humanities, must become the moderator of society over the coming years. Because young Madison, we have polarized as a country. And we Cherokees come from a very long line of strong debate at what we call the Dinawiga, the council house. We are strong debaters, but we are also culturally believers in consensus. If you went to the Cherokee towns 1,000 years ago, the entire community would come into the council house. It wasn't just for chiefs or for council members. Everyone came in. Can you imagine? Women spoke. Yes, all were welcome there. And after the strong debate, there was consensus about the movement of the community. And so if we extrapolate that tribal example into society today, you see, we're having strong debate right now in this country. We're having strong debate in this state. It has taken on a tone of perhaps political partisanship, or it's taken on concepts of belief, of responsibility, or extension of government. But we're having strong debate. The question is, will we reach consensus or not? Will we agree to agree on how we're going to move forward? I believe that it is the realm of the humanities that will have to be the facilitator of these conversations. And I know that bear with me for a moment, because I'll have to drill down a little further. That could sound confusing. So I'll interview myself for a while. Well, what are you saying, Jay? That somehow, are you talking about the Humanities Council? Why no, Jay? What I really mean is that it will be individuals who understand the importance of law, of the true civic understanding of our society, that have a strong understanding of the importance of art and music and history, of architecture. It's only through that knowledge base that they'll come together and understand that being able to, using a banker term, to reconcile these very strong topics of debate, these very strong concepts of polarization, that only through a consensus building will society be able to move forward as a civil assembly. If we're going to continue to be a democracy, if we're going to be a republic, then we must act as one. That will be rooted in ordinary citizens having a much deeper understanding of, having pondered all the attributes that come to us through the humanities. that's what I believe the role will be for us in the future.
Okay. So just to kind of wind down a little bit, I think we should go back and talk about why you think the humanities are so important to individuals, and why you think they should continue to be funded. I know we just kind of talked about like the future of humanities, but what's the biggest impact in rural communities, and just kind of to give one last brief overview and tying everything together.
Okay. The greatest value for the greatest impact that the humanities can make is not just for rural markets or for metropolitan areas. And in fact, it is overarching across all citizens. Our greatest value is that through the study of all of the disciplines, so to speak, within the humanities, will cause us to be a better people. When we think deeper, and when we think with a much broader arc of who we have been historically, who we are today, I have to believe that we'll have a better idea of who we should be in the future. We're moving from the no longer to the not yet. Oklahoma is no longer a land-run state where on April 22nd, 1889, the pioneer spirit were roaring down here to pitch our tents and build a city. We're no longer 39 federally recognized Indian tribes that through some quasi-misguided federal thought of relocation of native peoples, or perhaps even, dare I say, ethnic cleansing, has brought these people to Oklahoma. We're no longer Indian territory and Oklahoma territory. We must genuinely think as Oklahomans. And just as Gladwell said, we have a cultural inheritance that will help guide us there. But we have to stop thinking in a segmented fashion. And only when we pursue the various disciplines within the humanities and we broaden our perspective of thought and analysis, will we cultivate a deeper tolerance for things that are different from where maybe I grew up, or how I grew up, or how I was shaped. And I'll understand better what your cultural inheritance is. And maybe when we put those together, they will in fact make something that is much greater than just the individual contribution. They'll make the whole. If we can do that, then we'll be a better state. We'll have a brighter future. So I guess I would say to those that are promoters of the humanities, those that are managers, so to speak, or those that are embracers of the humanities, no pressure here, no pressure. We're only talking about the future of society. That's all.
Okay, I think that is just about all I have for you today. Is there anything else you want to say before we leave?
Well, I guess I would want to interview you. So I'm assuming that being a student at Oklahoma State University, that you're pursuing particular majors or topics there. What are you pursuing?
I am a current history major with a geography minor.
History major with a geography minor. I love
yes.
that. I am envious. Yes. I should quit my job and go back to school, because that's exactly what I would want to study. That's outstanding.
Yeah. And hopefully my goal is to use that to either do oral history interviews like this for the rest of my life, or be in a museum and make history more accessible to the general public. So
it is fascinating that I believe that most of the answers to many of the problems that we face today have already been faced and they have already been answered. It may have been with a different technology, maybe even a different language. It definitely was a different time. But if we would spend more time studying those who face the challenges of their time and perhaps reaching in to pluck out the adaptive formula that they use for succeeding and advancing their societal time, we might find that those are very applicable today. I believe that you are in a laudable pursuit, young lady. I do indeed. Well, I guess that concludes our interview. Is this where we make leave-taking signs and head out the door? And, what happens next?
Next, we will we'll find the recording and I'll go through and then work on transcripts and everything. And then you got back the signed documents, right?
Yes,
there were 2 of them.
I think I have, using my technological background, I have imaged those and forwarded to the Humanities Council. So they should, in fact, have all that you need to be able to say this now belongs to us, and we will use it as we damn well please.
Okay. Well, then I believe that's it, and I'll let you know probably through email if there's any problems.
Did this go down the direction you needed it to go?
Yeah, it was great.
Okay, well,
So,
all right.
Thank you very much.
So grade inflation-wise, you think a good solid B, maybe, or at least a C on this?
B plus, at least.
B plus, okay. Well, okay. I'll
probably an A.
Well, remember, we're fighting grade inflation here as much as we possibly can. I know on earlier today, I was sending an email to a group of people, and there was all sorts of documents in it that were attached and whatnot. A lady at the other end gave me a B plus on my typing abilities and formatting. We're just fine. Mm-hmm. It's an honor to meet you and to work with you and to get to see you. Will you be continuing this process for a number of additional weeks or months or years? Or
yeah, our current project, my list of interviews, we're supposed to complete all of our interviews by mid to late April. Okay. You're actually my first interview, so
I beg your pardon.
Thank you. I said you're actually my first interview of this project.
Did you just say I was your first interview for this project?
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
That's what I said.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
Are there others?
How did I do?
Oh, I was very impressed. Now, I will tell you that it is a tad disturbing, that every once in a while you look away and obviously you're just writing things down. And I don't know if you're thinking, this guy is really got personality disorders and I should find someone for medication and counseling. I don't know what that was. And of course, I've been deeply disturbed by those things that are hanging on the wall behind you as well. I can't tell if you're drying those out or if you're hiding something that's there on the wall. And then I've tried to figure out that one container that you have in the background that looks like soy sauce, but it also looks like it has a squirt top on it there. It's just...
the things on the wall are my roommate's reusable mask and her dish towel, and then that is dish soap.
Oh, well, okay, I
feel
better already. So it's an institutional looking sink there. Are you living on campus?
Mm-hmm. I am in South Hall.
Willard? Are you in Willard?
No, Willard is a educational building now. It's not a residence hall. How old
I am. I may have snuck into that educational building when I was in school there. You never know. I know I did cause a small riot there in the building to be evacuated once, but it wasn't all my fault. It was just a misunderstanding entirely. No, you are a delight. You have well-framed questions. You're very engaging, and I believe that you get an A.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, my speculation is I have socks that are older than you are, and since I'm an older guy, I get to ask that. How old are you, young lady?
I turned 20 on Saturday.
It is on this last Saturday?
Yeah, the 20th. Yeah.
In Cherokee, we would say Ali Halesti Nihi. Happy birthday to you, and this is the very best year of well, actually all years are the best, but I jokingly tell people, I say, you know what the best birthday is? I go, no, I say, it's the next one. But the truth is, if I could go back in time and be 20 again, oh my, what a grand time it would be. The teens are behind you at this point. You've not yet reached the age of legal contracting, though, so you're still kind of in that tweener stage, so to speak, where no one can bind you contractually to many of your decisions, and that's a wonderful place to be for a while. If I could have been as prepared and articulate as you when I was 20, I'd be a rocket scientist today. But remember, I was just a Forrest Gump kind of guy, just bumping along. You seem to be a very thoughtful and very disciplined individual. And if you will keep those skill sets to the fore and just amplify them as much as you can, there's nothing but success for you in the future. And that's not a prediction. I think that's an assuredness that comes toward you. Will you keep up with me from time to time and let me know how this project is going? You can drop me an email and say, hey, guess what? You were the worst interviewee that we had. And thank God we didn't record any of that. And we're not going to use any of it, Mr. Hanna. And there was a lot of things that you said that we've turned over to the psychology department here at Oklahoma State. And they're combing through it now and wanting to talk with you in another case study that they're doing. But then again, I have no idea who else you're interviewing. So let's fast forward for a moment. Once you get all this put together, what happens to this? Do you inscribe it onto a wax plate that is attached to a Mars rover that's launched into outer space, or simply set out into the deep space toward Alpha Centauri? What's going to happen with this?
It will be uploaded onto the Oklahoma Oral History Research Repository that's here at OSU in the library. It'll have public access, so people can access it online. So people that we don't know will be watching this eventually. Hopefully they'll cut out the part where we talk like crazy people. But yeah, it'll go onto that and be public information. And someday some undergrad student is going to use it for the paper, hopefully.
You know, you do realize, being a history major, what you're doing here. You remember that during another very trying economic time called the Depression, that the federal government was brilliant back then as well. I mean, you know, that they, for their convolutedness, they actually do some pretty cool things. I went, when I was about your age, to the Oklahoma Historical Society, combing through their archives, and I found the interview of my great-grandfather in 1936, I think it was, when he was interviewed by an individual that had been employed under the Works Progress Administration. You know, they didn't just put people to work building the Grand Coulee Dam. They put artists to work painting murals in post office buildings. They hired English majors and history majors to go out and do oral histories across the entire United States. And those are still on file. They're not quite as technologically advanced as what we're doing, but it was so refreshing to listen to my great-grandfather, who I only know for just a brief period of time. He passed away when I was very, very young. But I got to read his interview, and he was talking about early Cherokee days and stories that had been passed to him. And it was just in one of those WPA interview forms. Have you ever seen any of those or heard of that project?
No, I actually haven't yet.
It was like the original oral history project. And you're just doing a modern version of what they were doing in the 1930s. Mm-hmm. Very cool. Very cool. Now, I know from our discussion that you are a fancier of World War II history.
Yeah.
Well, if you ever find yourself coming to Oklahoma City or headed this way, you will let me know, and I will bring my father's photo album he served with the 505th Regiment of the 82nd Airborne during World War II, made all 4 combat jumps of the airborne. And, you know, my father was 1/4 by blood Cherokee, so you know, he's from Adair County too. And he, in many ways, you know, was a true warrior. And being from Adair County, he also didn't play by the rules very often. You know, during the Normandy invasion, they were not supposed to be taking cameras with them. And so he didn't take a camera with him, but he had relieved a German officer of an OOHRP camera not long after he had parachuted into France and started taking pictures with it. And I have delightful photographs of my father in his full combat gear on June the 6th, 1944, just outside of La Haye, France. It's a phenomenal set of images. And he, my favorite, he was wounded at Normandy at D+7 and evacuated off of Utah Beach. And he apparently held onto his camera that he had relieved from that German officer that he had killed, that was commanding an artillery unit that he and some other troopers had silenced. We won't go into the detail of it, but he did win the first of 2 of his Bronze Stars with valor, with the little V device on it, by silencing those guns that were firing on Utah Beach. But he kept his camera with him. He got the film developed and sent pictures back home to his parents. And on the back of it, he says, this is me and a buddy in the hedgerows of France. And he said, I got to use my Thompson. He carried a Thompson submachine gun, and in this picture, it's laying across his lap. He said, I got to use my Thompson on some Jerry's not long after this picture was taken. He used the word Jerry's as though it were a World War I term. My grandfather had served during the First World War, and I'm certain that that was a term that had laminated in my dad's head as a small kid. These are not Germans, they're Jerry's. And you would enjoy seeing those photographs. They were taken on the day of the Normandy invasion by somebody who was there. Interesting times. Interesting times. Well, young lady, have a productive weekend. It was my honor to be here today, and it was even more so my honor. I may put this on my Vita that I was the very first resume in the oral history of the Oklahoma Humanities Council. And you'll let me know out there someplace. I never go look at things that I have had recorded, but I might actually condescend to do this just for the fun of it.
Okay.
All right. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Bye, Madison.
Have a good day. Bye.